So, foundational truths of the Christian faith. This is what we call creeds. We'll probably cover more things than are listed in the Apostles' creeds, because they don't cover everything that they could have or should have covered. But there is just some things that make us stand out as Christian, and there's plenty of people that consider themselves Christians that aren't. And one of the main reasons for that is that they reject the fundamentally understood doctrine of who Christ is. But Jehovah's Witnesses don't believe that Jesus is God in the sense that the Christian believes it. The Mormons do not believe that Jesus is God at all. They think that he's the brother of Lucifer, believe it or not. But the name of their church is the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. So there is those two. There is Muslims, which you might not think of as something Christian, but the Muslim faith is a combination of Judeo and Christian beliefs.
We looked that up the other day.
Yeah. Yeah.
So with the brother of Lucifer thing, do they believe he's like Lucifer is the evil side and Jesus is the good side, and then there's that dichotomy, or
No.
they are both?
Remember that the Mormons believe in polytheism, many gods. And so they believe that way back before Lucifer showed from Joseph Smith. Every cult has a prophet that redefines the biblical truth. That's what they do. So the first thing you know about a cult is they have people they depend on that they call prophets. And those prophets, which, by the way, come along I think Muslims would be the oldest, I believe. And I think we're talking about, wow, I should know this, but it's escaping me. But Muslims came along hundreds of years after the Christian faith. They're the oldest. Mormons, Jehovah's Witnesses, they're all only 200 or 300 years old. They're not old at all. And when they come to my door, I tell them, forget about your script. I just want you to answer me one question. How is it logical that the Christian church went on for 1600, 1700, 1800 years, and there was no information that you have? And now, because God couldn't get it right 2000 years ago, now you've come along and you've got it right. They're like, they don't even know what to say to that. Their first level of people look at you like, and they look back at the guy that's watching them 3 feet away. And he's like, well, and they try to change the subject because it defies logic. And so for us who are in the Christian faith, it is comforting to know that you have all these people, millions of them, that consider themselves Christians. And yet it all comes down to a prophet who has heard new good news, supposedly, that changes all the old news that has been understood for 2000 years in the Christian faith. So when you have the Roman Catholic Church for 1500 years, and then the Protestant movement starts coming out. Well, what brought that Protestant movement out is that there were people in the Roman Catholic Church that says, you know what? We're deciding what the Bible means. We need to get the Bible out to the people. We're not the only ones who should be studying the Bible. And so they started translating the Bible from the original languages, or the Latin, which was the big thing. They had it Latin so that only the priest who knew Latin could read it. And so they wanted to keep the Bible from the people. And so the beginnings of this movement was just people trying to get a Bible into the hand of a common person in their own language. And they were burned at the stake by the Roman Catholic Church, right? And so what's beautiful about this from my perspective is it's so easy to see the heretics, because the heretics either have a prophet that takes them off course, even like the Seventh-day Adventists, who many Christians just accept as Christian, and yet they have a prophet who is a woman, and she is known to have lied, to have written books that were written by other people and put them out in her name, saying that she's heard from God, and yet they don't walk away from it. You know, they don't walk away from it. If I'm going to a church and the leader of the church proves to be a charlatan, I'm going somewhere else. I may not leave Jesus, but I'm going to leave that church, right? But they stay with it and they just change the doctrines. So it's great, guys, because it's an easy filter to just say, okay, at least I can check these people off and say they don't have the truth because they don't come along and support. Here we are, we're carrying around the Bible that's 2,000 or more years old. Much of it's 3,900 years old. So we're always going back to the original. And when, if there's some issue, we go to the Greek or the Hebrew and we go, okay, here's what that word means. We don't go to some prophet and say, hey, this prophet says this, or, it's just obvious that it's heretical. So how do you get off? It's because you leave the foundational thing. So I'm telling you, if there's anything I've learned about being a Christian, it isn't that I need to learn new things every time I go to Bible study or church. I just need to be reminded of the things that need to be right here all day long. That's what I need. I need to know what it means to be a Christian and be reminded and reminded and reminded, because I drift in. If I quit looking at the Bible for a week, who knows how bad off I'll be. I drift. I think it's human nature to drift. So our first lesson is God exists. And I have two things I want to do tonight that's going to be really fun. One is I have an introductory to this lesson that I want to give you, and I hope I can do it in about 10 minutes. And then I want to give you a bunch of clips from two people that will really take this lesson to a high level, because what I want to do is introduce you to the arena of the highest level of minds who are debating, does God exist? So I'm going to take you to some clips from someone named John Lennox, who is one of the greatest Christian apologists, defenders. That's what that word means. And he's a professor. I believe he taught at Oxford. I know he has 2 degrees from Oxford. He's a mathematical genius. And then we have Dawkins, Richard Dawkins, and he is the leading atheist, called the new atheist of our time. And these two go at it head to head in a one-on-one debate where they can just ask each other questions. It's not one of those things where one's talking this way and one's talking this way. So they really do interact, and I like that about it. So I just got little clips. The longest one's like 5 minutes. The shorter ones are 1 and 2 minutes in length. And it will give you and I something to think about, talk about, and just look at this battle at the highest level, because it is the atheists who are going to dissuade your kids from believing in God, because that's the first step. If you dismantle the idea that God exists, then you've just dismantled Christianity completely. And of course, let's not pretend, not just your kids are in jeopardy, you and I are too, because the devil's telling us every day, do you really believe in God? Do you really think this is true? I'm blown away and shocked when I hear Christians of a lifetime act like we have blind faith, or act like that there's some kind of doubt about what we believe. And so we got to make sure we know what we believe, and we got to see it from the eyes of Scripture, and make sure that it's meeting up to be the same faith that they had. Because if we have a different faith than what the original folks had, the apostles, we're not going to make it. This is not going to be good enough. So first scripture, Genesis 1:1. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. Notice that there's no argument here that God didn't say, now I want to prove that I exist, or here's why I'm the one who created everything. He just states clearly, God created the heavens and the earth. This is written by Moses. And so we know that this was God's revelation. When Moses was on the mountain for 40 days and 40 nights, 2 times in his ministry of 40 years, I think it was 2 times. This was very important meetings that God had with Moses to give him all the guidance of writing the first 5 books of the Bible. God existing is the thing that we've got to believe most first Foremost, the very first foundation stone is that. How do we know that God exists? Let's look at a few scriptures. Romans 1:18. For the wrath of God is revealed from heaven against all ungodliness and unrighteousness of people who suppress the truth by their unrighteousness. What suppresses the truth? People practicing unrighteousness, okay? So, because what can be known about God is plain to them because God has made it plain to them. Okay, so if I was a liberal theologian, I would say, well, what makes Paul think that? Instead of saying, oh, the Holy Spirit has revealed that to Paul. He wrote down what thus saith the Lord. Do you see the difference? If I'm going to analyze this from the perspective of the Apostle Paul, which is what liberal theologians do, they want to know, what did Paul think that made him write that down? Rather than that Paul sat down and was inspired by the Holy Spirit to write this stuff down. And that's exactly what happened. So here's a fact from the Holy Spirit. If you accept the Bible as the word of God, if you accept that God exists, then how do we know he exists? What does he say that makes us know that we know that God, that people know, even people that don't believe in God, that God exists? It says, because God has made it plain to them. All right. So you can believe that or you cannot believe that. But if you're a Bible believer, of course, what we see here is the people who say they don't believe in God are lying. That's the bottom line. They're lying. Okay, let's look at this next two verses here. For, this is continuing on in Romans 1. For, since the creation, how far back? How long has this been working? Since the creation of the world, his invisible attributes, his eternal power and divine nature have been clearly seen. Clearly seen. Not just you, not just me, because we believe in Jesus. From the beginning of creation, they've been clearly seen because they are understood through what has been made, created, what God made. That's how he made it plain. So people are without excuse, for although they knew God, they did not glorify him as God or give him thanks, but they became futile in their thoughts, and their senseless hearts were darkened. Although they claimed to be wise, they became fools. When you see the clips that I'm going to show you, you're going to see that in action. You're going to see the fool who says you don't believe God exists. But what are we going to believe from that? Are we going to believe him because his mouth says, oh, no, I'm sure there's no God. God doesn't exist. Or are we going to believe what God says, who created this person? And God says God, made it plain to him that he exists. He just decided he didn't want to believe God exists. And by the words of Dawkins' own mouth, you will see why he don't believe God exists is because he hates God. It comes down to that. So if this God does exist, and it's obvious because you go into the universe and you see the order and the law of creation at work, you come into the world, you see the creatures that are made, the vast amount of differences between animals and birds and reptiles and humans. You see all of this just unbelievable number of evidences of an intelligent design. Then you have to ask yourself, okay. So we can agree that God exists, but is there a lot of gods or is there one God? Polytheism says there's lots of gods. They even war against each other. This is what man in foolishness decide to make as religion way back in the dark ages and even before, And so they had the idea that there was many gods. Okay, so polytheism, many gods. Anything more than one would be polytheism. Monotheism, one God. Judaism, one God. They believe in one God. Christianity, they believe in one God. Catholicism, they believe in one God. Mormonism believes in multiple gods. Jehovah's Witnesses, I don't know if they believe in multiple gods, but I know they don't believe Jesus is God. That's the problem. And so we have a lot of different religions today. Today, Buddhism, there's different ones. And of course, they're not grounded in any material that's inspired in their religion. They like Buddha, the writings of Buddha and so forth, but I don't think they think of it as inspired. So if you're going to believe in God exists, then let's talk about, is there a lot of gods or is there one God? And Isaiah 45, 5-7, I am the Lord, that is Yahweh, that word when it's capitalized in your Bible. I didn't do the capitalization here. That means Yahweh. Used to think of that in the past, some English translations would translate it Jehovah. But the truth of the matter is there is no sound like Jehovah in the Hebrew language. And so, and because of the Jehovah's Witnesses, I don't use the word Jehovah at all, because you can prove there's no such thing as the word Jehovah. And I put it on a podcast. And so therefore I don't use the word Jehovah, because Jehovah's Witnesses make that their big deal. And the Seventh-day Adventists make Sabbath the big deal. So they all have these things they're hung upon that are straw man, cases. I am the Lord Yahweh. I have no peer. There is no God but me. I arm you for battle. That could be, I equip you for battle, even though you do not recognize me. I do this so people will recognize from east to west that there is no God but me. I am the Lord. I have no peer. I am the one who forms light and creates darkness, the one who brings peace and creates calamity. I am the Lord who accomplishes all these things. This is the verse you have to use when you see Trump, pushed aside, and then we see this figurehead put into office. And you got to go, okay, in the end, God is the one who's in charge. And he's making it perfectly clear. I do the good things and I also create the calamities. I'm God. And this is what I do. Yes, exactly. So there we established that there isn't many gods. There's one God. There is no war of the gods in any way, shape, or form. And by the way, Satan is no peer of God, and he is not the opposite of God. He's nothing compared to God. He's a sneeze. He's nothing. God uses him as a useful idiot. That's what he is. He's doing the work of God because God is purifying his church. He's bringing his church to where he wants it to be. So here's the next point about God's existence. He is the God who communicates clearly with his human creation. That's what the atheist doesn't see. They don't look at creation and see that's a communication. They don't look at the Bible and consider it communication. But that's exactly what it is. To believe that God exists is to know that he is perfect in every way of his attributes, and in every way being perfect, which, by the way, we're going to look at those attributes eventually. And in those ways of being perfect, he is 100% in all of them. Love, kindness, wrath, everything that is, he has 100%. He owns it. He don't use it. He is that. So this God communicates, and he communicates very clearly, as we saw in Romans. In John 1:1, it says, in the beginning, how far back was that? This is a reference to Genesis 1:1, which is what we started with. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. This is John associating with Genesis 1:1. So that's the beginning. That is the beginning of this creation. And this is not talking about the beginning of God, because he has no beginning. So in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was fully God. The Word was with God in the beginning. Look at the emphasis there. Very important, because he's trying to make something very clear. This didn't happen later. This all happens in the beginning. All things were created by him. Listen to this powerful statement. And apart from him, not one thing was created that has been created. Who created it? The Word. What is the Word? In the Greek, it's called logos, or logos, however you want to pronounce it. This word means to have a message, to make a speech, to communicate. In context of what he's saying, it means the ultimate communication of the truth concerning who God is and what he's about and what his will is. In the beginning was the Word, the communication. Well, the Word was more than just communication, and we see that in the next verse. Actually, it's not the next verse, but it's down to the 14th verse. And it says, and now the word, let me say that again. It doesn't say and. It says, now the word became flesh and took up residence among us. We saw his glory. Look at this. The glory of the one and only. You think God is interested in making sure that you and your children understand there's only one God? And if someone's serving a God that is not that God, that is not a God that they're serving, even though in their mind it's a God. It isn't a God because they think it is. It's not a God because the God of the universe says it isn't, because he says they don't exist. So the glory of the one and only, full of grace and truth, who came from the Father. So there's word and truth put together. And aren't you glad? Grace. Yeah. Full of grace. But he don't compromise truth by being full of grace. Grace and truth correspond. When you come to God, you change. You change. You don't come to God and say, I'm not changing, but I'll accept your son, but I'm not changing. That is not how that's going to work out according to Jesus's gospel. So we have God, who is the only one who exists, and he wants to communicate and make sure. One of the first things that you know is that he's the creator. He is solely the creator, and that he's full of grace and truth, and that he wants to communicate. So God is actually looking for people who want to hear what God communicates. When you have someone on social networks trying to claim that Jesus or God is a woman and not a man, or he's just as much a woman, there's a whole group that goes through all the malls and stuff, and they try to show you that God, hey, did you know God's a woman and he's not a man? So what's God looking for? Is he looking for something? And if he is, how do we know? Well, if someone's saying something to you, they're trying to get your attention, right? So when Romans says God has made himself known to everyone, that means he wants their attention. What does he want them to do? He wants them to listen. What's the first commandment? Hear. That's it. Hear. See how we run that together? Hear, O Israel. But the word is not H-E-R-E. So hear ye. It's not like here I am, listen to me. It's H-E-A-R. Hear this. Listen to this. Remember our long couple of weeks on that? I never thought of it that way. Yeah, I always thought it was like here. Yeah, like a command. Yes. Yeah, he is over there. Okay, like, hey guys, I got something to say. Here.
Listen, oh Israel.
Yeah. Yes. So God is looking for people who want to listen because he's talking, right?
Yes.
And what else is he looking for? He's looking for a response. That's faith. Absolutely convicted or listening with conviction that God is speaking and that you are opening up and saying, tell me what sometimes Susie comes in, she's upset about something that I'm doing or I'm going to do, or I'm going to go do this today. It's Friday. You can't do this today. And all I got to do is hear it and hear in her voice, panic, and say to her, okay, no problem. I'll figure it out another way.
And I still yell for 15 minutes.
But the deal is, if I heard her right and I heard her panic, as her husband who loves her, I'm like, okay, I didn't say that to upset you. I didn't try to throw you into a turmoil. And so I back right out of it. Why? Because I listened more than the words. You're picking Friday to do this? More than those words, I'm listening to her cry. God has a cry. Unbelievably, that God, Almighty God, who can just smash you like an ant, has a cry to us. Please listen to me. While his thumb could just go, but he cries. Listen, this is the important thing to know about God. Hebrews 11:1. Now, faith is being sure of what we hope for. If you're not sure, you haven't got real faith, because faith is sure of what we hope for. By the way, faith does not come from you. It comes from him. He infuses you with faith. That's what a new heart and a new spirit is. That's what sprinkling does.
Hey, lest somebody misunderstand that comment on sprinkling. What I meant by sprinkling is referring to Ezekiel 36:25, where God says, I, God, will sprinkle you with pure water, and you will be clean from all your impurities, and I will purify you from all your idols. And he goes on to say, you're going to have a new heart. I'm going to take out the old heart of stone, and I'm going to give you a heart of flesh, and I'm going to put my spirit and new spirit within you.
It infuses you with a spirit of faith that comes from him. That's why it works supernaturally. Now faith is being sure of what we hope for, being convicted or convinced of what we do not see. It is not talking about blind faith here. It's not even talking about blindness, okay? It is talking about something that's invisible, but the faith is concrete. It's actual. And the faith that God has put into our hearts, if indeed he has, it is more real than the very material world that we live in. Hebrews 11:2. For by it, that's faith, the people of old received God's commendation. That means in the NASB, for by it, men of old gained approval from God. The only thing you can offer God is faith that he'll accept. He won't accept your good works as an offering that says, I'll offer you my good works if you'll let me into heaven. He'll say, no, you're going to split hell wide open because you could not possibly make up for your sinful state. But if you will come to God in faith and believe that he's going to save you himself outside of merit, then you have real faith. Hebrews 11:3. These are all in a row here that I just wanted to isolate out to talk about them. By faith, we understand that the worlds, this is the universe, where it's not just talking about the world, or set in order at God's command so that the visible has its origin in the invisible. I think so. Yeah. Sorry. The worlds were prepared by the word of God so that what is seen, that is visible to us, or what is material, was not made out of things which are visible. God is a spirit. He's invisible. Does that make him any less real? Couldn't. If God fills the universe and he's a spirit, he's as real as this table, but we don't have eyes to see spirit, right? So he's saying that the worlds were made out of things which aren't visible. And it's funny, you're going to hear old Dawkins today say similar things about the wonderful, intelligent evolution of nature. Hebrews 11:6. This is our last verse, and then I'm going to get to the clips. It says, now without faith, it is impossible to please him, God, for the one who approaches God must believe that he exists and that he rewards those who seek him. Now you see why God's existence is the fundamental, most important thing. And when someone starts walking backwards away from God or their Christian faith, that's the first thing they're thinking. I don't really think God exists. I don't think this world would look like this if God exists. So we have to believe these two things. Here's why. Just believing God exists doesn't make you a genius. It makes you not a fool. The Bible says the fool hath said in his heart, there is no God. So believing that God exists does not make you a Christian, doesn't make you a genius, doesn't make you special. Devils, the Bible say, believe that God exists and they tremble. So they have more of the fear of the Lord on thinking about God existing because they know they're in trouble since he does exist. Satan knows that God exists. He has conversations with God, though I don't think Satan has ever seen God at any time, just like the Bible says no one has ever seen God at any time. I think that's why Satan thinks he can win, is because he is materially the most beautiful creature God ever made. And he's the most talented creature that God ever made. And he's never seen God. So therefore he thinks he's it. And the Bible says no one has seen God at any time. And because God is a spirit, I think Satan has never seen God. Yes.
So is the devil interchangeable with demons?
No, he's not. No, he's the head.
Is Satan that is the devil too?
Satan
Can also be referred to as
is the devil.
I'm just making sure because how I thought you said devil.
There are devils,
Okay, which are those
demons,
referred to as
devils.
demons? Okay,
Those
I
are
was just-
interchangeable. Little
That was
demons.
what I was making
Yeah.
sure I understood that correctly.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
'Cause that was going to be what a fundamental was like. Oops, I think
I think it's in Revelation that isolates it down to the definition. It says the devil and Satan, that old serpent. It puts all three in one verse,
Okay.
and it's clarifying these are all one.
Okay. I just
So
wanted to make sure you
yeah.
understood that. But I didn't
Yeah.
get that
Yeah.
wrong. Okay.
exactly. So the emphasis tonight is simply this: that we and our kids and our mother and our father, we've got to believe that God exists on a level to where we know he's right here all the time. He is a spirit. He exists. And we should tremble along with the devils who know that God exists. We should feel that way in terms of his awesomeness. It should take our breath away to think that God sees everything we do, knows everything, not from out here, but from within us, because he lives inside of us. Now we get to some clips, and this is going to be fun. This is Richard Dawkins versus John Lennox. And here's Dawkins, and I think he's probably the leader of the atheists today. And John Lennox, who is an amazing guy. I've read some of his books, and he's fantastic. I love this guy. So what I'm going to do is go ahead and show you some clips. These are not, let's see, all of these are out of one debate, and one clip, probably the last one I'm going to show you, is not in this debate. It's when Dawkins was younger, but it's really cool because it kind of goes back and shows you his thinking and how it's evolved over time. So, all right, here we go. The first clip here is going to be Richard Dawkins. He's today's leading atheist. And he's going to open up with comments deriding his opponent, who is John Lennox, for believing in a God who can do miracles. Dawkins thinks that this is a soft target, meaning that this would be his opponent's most vulnerable weakness in the debate. You are going to hear Dawkins infer his opponent is not as sophisticated as other theologians that Dawkins has run into. Here he is referring to those theologians who evidently are those who have embraced liberal theology, which, by the way, would be heretical because they completely reject all of the miracles listed in Scripture and they just explain them all away. So this Dawkins can appreciate in those kind of theologians and have respect for them, but not Lennox, his opponent, who believes in silly miracles and purposes of a non-existent God. In essence, Dawkins wants to be clear. He doesn't believe God even exists at all. But if the Christian God of John Lennox did exist, he, Dawkins, rejects out of hand this God's testimony about himself. Watch this.
Richard, the question as we begin is, has science buried God?
Well, which God? I mean, we could take Einstein's God, which is not really a personal God at all, but which is a sort of poetic metaphor for the mystery, that which we don't understand about the universe. We could take a deist God, a sort of God of the physicists, a God of somebody like Paul Davies, who devised the laws of physics, God the mathematician, God who put together the cosmos in the first place and then sat back and watched everything happen. And that would be, the deist God would be one that I think it would be, one could make a reasonably respectable case for that, not a case that I would accept, but I think it is a serious discussion that we could have. The third kind of God is one of which there are thousands and thousands of varieties, Zeus and Thor and Apollo and Amun-Ra and Yahweh. And we don't actually need to go through all those because as Larry has said, I've encountered John Lennox before and I know what the God he believes in, which is the Christian God. So we only have to talk about the Christian God. John Lennox is a scientist who believes that Jesus turned water into wine. A scientist who believes that Jesus somehow influenced all those molecules of H2O and introduced proteins and carbohydrates and tannins and alcohol and turned it into wine. He believes that Jesus walked on water. I had been accustomed to debating with sophisticated theologians, and I come across John Lennox, who is a scientist who believes in all those things. In particular, he believes that the creator of the universe, the God who devised the laws of physics, the laws of mathematics, the physical constants, who devised the parsecs of space, billions of light years of space, billions of years of time, that this paragon of physical science, this genius of mathematics, couldn't think of a better way to rid the world of sin than to come to this little speck of cosmic dust and have himself tortured and executed so that he could forgive himself. That is profoundly unscientific. Not only is it unscientific, it doesn't do justice to the grandeur of the universe. It's petty and small-minded, and that's the God that John Lennox believes in.
Okay, now, in the second clip, John Lennox addresses his opponent by showing what we might expect if there is a God who created everything. He also addresses Dawkins' dismissal of God having himself killed in order to forgive sin. Watch this.
Now, if there is a God, and if he created this universe, and if, as I believe, he is personal, then I would expect certain things to follow. One, that I would see evidence, not proof, but evidence in the universe that God existed. I feel I see that in the mathematical describability of the universe, in the fine-tuning of the universe, and so on, and in the marvelous sophistication of the world. I'd expect to see God's traces there. I would also expect that there may be occasions when God speaks in special ways, and therefore the more we try to analyze those things in terms of purely reductionist science, it'll get more and more difficult instead of more and more simple. I wouldn't expect there to be many of those places. I think the origin of life might be one of them. And certainly when it comes up into more recent history, you mentioned miracles. The thing that is central for me is the fact that what you call petty, and I feel is vastly significant, because it's touching on something that affects every human being, the question of death. Now, if Jesus really literally rose from the dead as a matter of history, that makes an enormous difference to our view of the world. And so far from being petty, if this is God speaking to us, then I want to take it extremely seriously.
In the next clip, Dawkins is emphatic about natural selection and how it works without design and therefore needs no intelligence or God to explain it. Lennox refutes this by asking, could it be a guided by intelligence process? By asking this, Lennox gets Dawkins to inferentially admit the observable evolutionary process could be guided. He doesn't come out and say it, but watch how Dawkins responds to this question of this possibility that intelligence could guide the process.
You say this illusion of design, and of course I find your writing so fascinating because of the metaphors and images you use. I do envy that capacity. And you said somewhere that it's terribly, terribly tempting to believe that it has been designed. But that Darwin has shown us that this design is an illusion. But I've been very interested in the kind of thing that Simon Conway Morris has been saying recently, that if you take the evolutionary pathways, they're navigating through an informational hyperspace with phenomenal precision. And therefore, there is the impression of design at that level. I mean, if this mechanism that you talk about, which doesn't account for the origin of life at all, but let's leave that aside, if it is so phenomenally clever, then it itself is giving evidence that there's a mind behind it.
The whole point of Darwinian natural selection is that it works without design, without foresight,
But that's
without
an
guidance.
assumption.
No, it's not an assumption. That is exactly how it works. Before Darwin came along, it looked perfectly obvious that even if evolution happened, there must be some guiding force to tell animals or plants how they ought to evolve. Natural selection is a blind force. The things that survive, survive. With hindsight, we can see that the ones that survive are the ones that are good at surviving. They have the genes that make them survive. Simon Conway Morris would not deny that. He's got some kind of, well, actually, I rather share his view of convergent evolution. We both of us are perhaps on the extreme end of Darwinians in that we emphasize the power of natural selection to home in on particular ends. Particularly, if you look around the museum, you'll see animals, marsupial animals from Australia that uncannily resemble non-marsupial animals, and Simon and I are both extremely keen on that. But that's produced by natural selection, as he would say. Natural selection is a mechanical, blind, automatic force. It's not, I can't say it's not guided, but there's no need for it to be guided. The whole point is that it works without guidance.
But it could be guided. Or do you completely shut that out?
I mean, why bother when you've got a perfectly good explanation that doesn't involve guidance?
I mean, the
Why
point is, you
gratuitously
use words
insert
like
something?
you use words like blind and automatic. This watch is blind and automatic, but it's been designed. The words themselves do not shut out that notion. And it seems to me that the impression I'm getting is that what's coming through is that the whole process is so sophisticated, it itself is giving evidence of a rational mind behind it. But am I understanding you right, that you say you deny that because you have an in-principle reason for denying it? That is, everything must, as far as you're concerned, go from the simple to the complex. And therefore, your major argument in the God delusion, if I understand it right, is that God is, by definition, more complex than the thing you're explaining, so he's got to be explained. Is that right?
That is a major point that I want to make.
In the next clip, we will see Lennox ask Dawkins how he squares his belief in the rational intelligibility of the universe. And yet Dawkins subscribes to the idea that it came into being as a result of a freak accident. With a straight face, Dawkins explains that this universe certainly looks very designed, but in fact is merely an imitation of something designed. Isn't that the weirdest thing? Imitation of something designed. What does that mean? Then Dawkins makes sure to underline his beliefs by stating with certainty that we know this is the truth, or we know this now. He maintains his position as a matter of fact. He goes on to say, we understand how it happened. And then he admits he doesn't know if the cosmos is designed, but he doesn't think so. The best part is at the end of this clip, where Dawkins resorts to a nonsensical argument about considering the idea of a quote unquote God would not be helpful. So you'll have to listen to this, because he thinks the creator is the very kind of thing that needs an explanation. So in other words, I'm not going to consider a creator here, because then I would have to be bothered by finding out where he came from and how he came into being. He denies God because he would not be able to explain how it is that God came into existence. Since it's already difficult enough to explain how a very simple universe, as he calls it, came into being with simplicity, it would be much harder to understand how a God comes into existence. What? Is this very intelligent man really offering this as an argument or an explanation as to why there couldn't be a God? It would be too difficult, His argument is that it would be too complicated to figure out how God came into being. I guess so, if indeed that God did not come into being at all, but was eternally existent. That would certainly cause Dawkins an Excedrin headache. Check this out.
As a scientist, we both believe in the rational intelligibility of the universe. I believe the universe is rationally intelligible because there's a creator God behind it. Now, how do you account for the rational intelligibility of the universe?
Well, John, you said that I believe that the universe is a freak accident, which is the opposite of what you believe. For many years, for many centuries indeed, it seemed perfectly obvious that it couldn't possibly be a freak accident because you only had to look at living creatures, the sort of magnificent diversity we see in this museum, and everything looked designed. And so it was clearly preposterous to suggest that it was due to any kind of freak accident. Darwin came along and showed that it's not actually a freak accident, but nor is it designed. There's a third way, which in the case of biology is evolution by natural selection, which produces a close imitation of something that is designed. It's not designed, we know that now, we understand how it happened, but it looks very designed. Now, the cosmos hasn't yet had its Darwin. We don't yet know how the laws of physics came into existence, how the physical constants came into existence, and so we can still say, is it a freak accident or was it designed? The analogy with biology might discourage us from being too confident that it's designed, because we had our fingers burned before the 19th century in thinking that biology, which looks so much more obviously designed, that we got our fingers burned there. Now, in the case of the cosmos, freak accident or design, the point that I've made over and over again is that even if we don't understand how it came about, it's not helpful to postulate a creator, because the creator is the very kind of thing that needs an explanation. And although it's difficult enough to explain how a very simple origin of the universe came into being, how matter and energy, how one or two physical constants came into existence, although it's difficult enough to think how simplicity came into existence, it's a hell of a lot harder to think how something as complicated as a god comes into existence. Difficult enough to think of how a deist God comes into existence, and even more difficult to think of how a Christian God who actually cares about things like sin and gets himself born of a virgin.
In the next clip, Lennox exposes Dawkins, catching him trying to turn God into a mechanism instead of an agent. God is the agent of design and purpose, and yet Lennox just won't view God as such, or even the possibility of this. He turns him into a part of creation as a mechanism. Watch this.
But let me go back to what you were saying before about guidance. When you drop a stone, it falls to the ground, and you as a scientist will explain that by gravity. You wouldn't dream of saying, oh, there must be a God pushing it down. That's exactly what you're in effect saying with respect to evolution.
Oh,
because we understand evolution in just the same kind of level as we, actually rather better level than we understand gravity.
No, and this is a very important point, because I detected in many of your writings that you oppose God and science's explanations. When Newton discovered the law of gravity, he didn't say, marvelous, now I can know how it works, I don't need God. God is an explicator at the level of an agent, not a mechanism. So that we can study mechanisms in biology, the more sophisticated they are, the more that might well point towards an agent. You don't argue away the existence of an agent by showing that there is a mechanism.
Here's what Dawkins is trying to do. He's using gravity as his example, saying that if we accept that there is a God behind gravity, then we have to just accept that it would be God who is driving the gravity at all times. In other words, God has to actively push everything to the ground through the use of gravity. And that would mean that there is a God behind gravity. But if there's not a God actively doing the gravity when it happens, then to him, then there's no God, because that gravity works without God being there. Here's the stupidity of this argument. Let's say you own a 7-Eleven convenience store and you don't want to stand there and open the door for your customers, or you don't want them to have to open and close the door for themselves. So you find someone who is intelligent and they can invent automatic doors that will open and close day and night without anybody manning the doors. In Dawkins' argument, if there's such a thing as gravity and it works automatically without an active God behind it, shoving everything to the ground, there can't be a God, or there doesn't need to be a God. There only needs to be gravity. If he stumbled into your 7-Eleven and he finds the doors opening and closing automatically, but he can't find anyone who actually invented them, then by his own argument, he would suppose that they invented themselves. And they, being in existence, prove there is no inventor of automatic doors. Rather than believe that a very intelligent being is the one behind figuring out how to put in place automatic doors that are going to work day and night without the inventor or anyone else manning the doors. The intelligent being invented a mechanism that would operate without his having to be present or doing any part of the operation. This is something that is so easy to understand, and yet as an argument against God, this is just craziness. In the next clip, Lennox asked Dawkins, how is it that God somehow is opposed to science, or the idea of God is opposed to science, or opposed to scientific arguments? Dawkins' reply, because you can explain everything without God. He says God is superfluous, which means needless or unnecessary. Yet in this statement, Dawkins forgets he cannot explain the existence of the cosmos. He admits this because the Darwin of the future, this is his words, hasn't arrived with a good explanation yet. He didn't state this in this clip, but he did in other clips, if you'll remember, or if they are in the future, you'll hear them. Check this out.
And I don't quite understand how you manage to get, if I understand you right, God and science as alternative explanations.
Well, I think you do get rid of an agent if the agent is superfluous to the explanation. That when you're studying something that's happening, there may well be an agent, and it may, if you're watching a car driving along and avoiding obstacles and turning left and turning right, you say there is an agent controlling that car, and certainly there is, there's a driver. But if you don't need an agent to explain what's going on, and we don't in the case of biology, and we don't in the case of gravity. Of course, I accept that Newton was a theist. He lived in the 17th century and everybody was. But you don't need an agent. An agent is a superfluous explanation. It's a gratuitous grafting on of something that you don't need.
Well, I find that unconvincing, because even if you accept the whole evolutionary paradigm,
well,
it depends on there being a fine-tuned universe. And that fine-tuned universe raises in itself very big questions as to the origin of the universe. Evolution doesn't deal with that.
No, it doesn't.
Nor does it deal with the origin of life.
No, those are separate points.
Those are separate points, but they're vastly major points.
They are, yes.
In the next clip, Lennox will introduce another argument from the basis of the language of DNA, which explicitly infers an intelligent mind behind its existence. Lennox asserts the fact that we have no evidence as human beings or as scientists that a language such as DNA or any other language has ever been known to exist anywhere without an intelligent mind behind it. And of course, Dawkins rejects this and says it's all just a freak accident. It's all by chance.
The notion of things in principle going from simple to complex, and they must go that way, that seems to me to be your belief, your faith.
Well, things must go from simple to complex.
Yes.
No. I mean, If things go from simple to complex, we need an explanation.
Yeah, we do
Natural
indeed.
selection is an explanation for that. It's the explanation in the case of biology.
Well, let's go back to the level of the origins of the universe and the origin of life. Now, life, as we both know, has got this digital database. It's got a language all of its own. Now, the only thing we know of capable of producing language is mind. And yet you reject that. By definition, as an atheist, you must reject that. There's no mind behind this language.
I do reject it. When you say the only thing we know that can produce language is mind, I mean, we know that what produces human language is mind. Of course we do, because that's human language. But DNA is not human language.
Yeah, but
DNA
it's very sophisticated.
It's very sophisticated, but it doesn't follow that it has to be generated by mind.
But we know of no other conceivable way of it being generated. You see, because it seems to me from the mathematical point of view, I think you said this somewhere in a different context, junk in, junk out. Here we have this phenomenally sophisticated information processor, which is the cell. Am I really to believe that that information processing capacity simply came about by the laws of nature and random processes without a mind?
Yes.
Well, I find that impossible to believe as a mathematician.
I know you do.
In the next clip, Lennox pushes back hard on Dawkins for an answer as to who made the universe. You see, Dawkins is always asking him who made God, so he forces this question. Dawkins can only say in reply, God is just too complicated. That's all he can turn to. It seems that in Dawkins' mind, he just can't or won't fathom that there could be a God, a complicated creator. Watch this.
To me, the biblical explanation in the beginning was the word, the logos. That makes perfect sense. And it makes sense of the fact that we can do science itself.
But you haven't explained where the logos came from in the first place.
Well, of course not, because the logos didn't come from anywhere.
Well, then, in what sense is it an explanation?
Because the notion that you say you have to ask who created the logos, that says that you're thinking of a created God. The whole point about the God revealed in the Bible is that he was not created. He is eternal. He is the eternal logos. And I ask myself, as an inference to the best explanation, which makes more sense, that there's an eternal logos and that the universe, its laws, the capacity for mathematical description and so on, that these things are derivative, including the human mind, from the logos. That makes very much more sense to me as a scientist that it's the other way round. When there is no explanation for the existence of the universe, do you just believe the universe is a brute fact?
The universe is an easier brute fact to accept than a conscious creator.
Well, who made it?
It's you who insist on asking that question.
No, you asked me who made the creator. The universe created you, Richard. Who made it then?
A God is a complicated entity which requires a much more sophisticated and difficult explanation than a universe, which is, according to modern physics, a very simple entity. It's a very simple beginning. It's not a negligible beginning, but it's a very simple beginning. That has got to be easier to explain than something as complicated as a God.
I'm getting the message that it's ridiculous for me to believe in a God who created the universe and me, because I have to ask who created God. All I'm doing is turning that question round and saying, the universe, you admit, created you because there's nothing else. Well, then who created it?
I understand you perfectly. I'm making that we both of us are faced with the problem of saying, how did things start?
Yes.
I'm saying it's a hell of a lot easier to start with something simple than to start with something complex. That's what complex means.
But I don't think so. If I pick up a book called The God Delusion, it's a pretty sophisticated book. It's got lots of words in it. But actually, as I look at page 1, I don't even need to go beyond page 1. I conclude that it comes from something more complex than that book itself, namely you.
Yes, I mean, obviously complex things exist and brains exist.
Well,
and
why
brains
can
are
I not
complex.
look at the universe, the whole show, which includes
Well, I'll tell
Dawkins
you
and
why.
Lennox?
I'll tell you why. Because my brain that produced a book has an explanation in its own right. That explanation is evolution. We go back and back and back to the origin of the universe. That provides an explanation for complex brains, and complex brains produce books and museums and cars and computers. Of course we have complex things that produce other complex things. But science has an explanation for where complex brains come from in terms of simple beginnings.
I don't think it has at all. At the level of the origin of life, reading the literature, even the recent literature, the word miracle comes up probably far too often for your liking anyway.
Again, in the next clip, Lennox forcibly pushes back on Dawkins for minimizing the miracle of the resurrection of Jesus Christ and what that means for humanity in terms of justice. He skillfully connects the idea of the miracle directly to the most important miracle in the Bible, namely Jesus's resurrection from the dead. In doing so, Lennox gets Dawkins to admit to the enormous importance of this idea, if indeed it is true. Dawkins admits this alone would make a huge difference, but of course, only if it were true, and Dawkins does not believe it's true. Then Dawkins, after admitting that this would be huge if it were true, he continues to call the idea of Christ's death and his resurrection a petty idea. Lennox presses forward, forcing Dawkins to answer the question, what about ultimate justice? Lennox concludes emphatically, if there is no God, there is no justice. Dawkins' reply, too bad. Look at this.
You mentioned miracles. The thing that is central for me is the fact that what you call petty, and I feel is vastly significant, because it's touching on something that affects every human being, the question of death. Now, if Jesus really, literally rose from the dead as a matter of history, that makes an enormous difference to our view of the world. And so far from being petty, if this is God speaking to us, then I want to take it extremely seriously. Why do you think it's so petty?
Well, of course it makes a huge difference if it's true.
Yes, exactly.
But you've suddenly leapt from sophisticated discussions of the origin of the universe, where one can have a proper discussion about whether some sort of cosmic intelligence could have set forth the laws of physics, and you suddenly jump to a man who lived 2,000 years ago, was born of a virgin, rose again from the dead.
Well, I only did that because you mentioned it first at the beginning.
I think that's petty. By comparison with the grandeur of the universe. I mean, to put my point again, do you really think that the creator of this magnificent edifice of the universe, the expanding universe, the galaxies, he really couldn't think of a better way to get rid of the sins on this one little speck of dust than to have himself tortured? He's the one who's doing the forgiving after all. Couldn't he just have forgiven?
Because this is a moral universe, Richard, and just forgiving doesn't make sense.
I mean, he has to kill himself in order
He
to...
doesn't kill himself.
Or get himself killed, tortured.
God sends his Son into the world to provide forgiveness and to provide a basis on which he can justly bring forgiveness to me. Now,
he has to get himself killed in order to do that.
Half a minute. We need to step back from this a little bit, because it's actually a highly relevant topic. In your world, where is justice to be found?
Well, justice is a human construct of great importance in human affairs, and it's something that most of us have a sense of, which I think probably can be given some sort of Darwinian explanation, but I don't see where you're taking this.
Well, my question is there any ultimate justice? You see, you say this is petty. I'm saying I find myself in a world which is a broken world, I find myself in a world where there's massive injustice, where many people won't get it. We're so privileged. We live in Oxford and so on. We've got enough money to live on, etc., etc. But if there is no God, then there's no ultimate justice. And one of the things that the resurrection transforms for me from pettiness right into center stage is, if this is true, then there's real hope that there be a rational evaluation and fair justice at the end of the world. But atheism doesn't give you that.
Okay, suppose there is no hope, suppose there is no justice, suppose there is nothing but misery and darkness and bleakness, suppose there is nothing that we would wish for, nothing that we would hope for. Too bad. That doesn't make it true, just because God would make us feel good.
In the following clip, Dawkins is bewildered as to why Lennox brought up the resurrection of Christ. Lennox uses this to take the debate to the core issue. Does God exist, and has he revealed himself to mankind? Lennox backs Dawkins down over a false statement Dawkins made in one of his books, stating that historians claim Jesus didn't even exist. Dawkins finally admits most historians do think Jesus existed. Lennox drives that point home by flatly stating that he has never found one historian who didn't believe that Jesus existed. Dawkins finally admits most historians did think that Jesus existed, and that maybe only one or two didn't think so. And in another clip, he actually flatly states, yes, Jesus existed. In the end, the God Dawkins is rejecting is the God who in his mind is petty because he cares about sin and man, and he just can't accept that. Watch this.
Well, then why do you bring that argument up?
Because I believe that there is evidence that it is true. I don't believe in the resurrection just like that, because faith is based on evidence.
I've changed your ground again. What you said before was that there is no hope without God, and it sounded
well, that's true. That's absolutely true.
Okay.
You just admitted it. So
I haven't admitted it. I said if that's true,
yes.
So what? I didn't say it was true. But anyway,
but
if
therefore
that's
the
true,
question
so what?
to be decided then is there a God, and has he revealed himself? And that's where again I think this pettiness needs to be pushed aside, because I can't get to know you as a person. You're not just a scientific object. I could look at you through a telescope or a magnifying glass. I could even dissect you and so on and so forth. But because you are a person, I cannot get to know you unless you're prepared to reveal yourself to me. So the fact that the claim of Christ to be the truth, to be God incarnate, that makes perfect sense to me, because if there is a God who invented this wonderful, marvelous universe with all its science and all the rest, then he has taken the initiative in getting to know us and revealing himself to us. And he's revealed himself to us at the level we can understand. We're persons, he's a person. That at least makes sense. So one of the very important questions to ask is that really true? Or is this simply myth and fantasy?
Well, myth and fantasy for me.
Yeah, well, do you know, that disturbs me for the following reason. Reading your book, The God Delusion, you say that it's under scholarly dispute among historians that Jesus actually existed. Now, I checked with the ancient historians. That is not so. And it disturbed me. History is not natural science. But what I don't understand is this: why you would write something like that.
I don't think it's a very important question whether Jesus existed. There are some historians, most historians think he did, some
They
historians
certainly
don't.
do. I couldn't find an ancient historian that didn't.
Well, there are one or two, but I don't really care, actually, because precisely because it's petty. I mean, if you could possibly persuade me that there was some kind of creative force in the universe, there was some kind of physical, mathematical genius who created everything, the expanding universe defies quantum theory, relativity, and all that. You could possibly persuade me of that. But that is radically and fundamentally incompatible with the sort of God who cares about sin, the sort of God who cares about what you do with your genitals, the sort of God who is interested, who has the slightest interest in your private thoughts and wickednesses and things like that. Surely you can see that a God who's grand enough to make the universe is not going to give a tuppenny cuss about what you're thinking about and your sins and things like that.
So you think that morality is not important?
Of course I don't think morality is not important. I'm
Well,
a human
it
being.
sounds like you're saying
No,
it isn't important.
I'm a human being, and I live in a society of human beings, and within a society of human beings, morality is, of course, important. But we are one of billions of planets on a huge scale, and a cosmic God who bothers about this kind of human scale is not the kind of God that is compatible with a scientific view of the universe. It's a medieval view.
But do you think that size is the measure of importance? Incidentally, on a logarithmic scale, you're about halfway between the atom and the universe. So if God thinks in terms of logarithms, your point falls, I think.
I mean, this is in a sense an emotional argument we've come into now. And
I don't think so at all.
If I were going to respect a God, it would be the kind of God the sort of God that Carl Sagan might have worshipped, not the sort of medieval God who fusses about sin, the obsession with sin and righteousness and sort of. I keep coming back to this word petty, and I stand by it.
The next clip is one of the most important, in that Lennox presses Dawkins on his willingness to completely ignore history and its overwhelming evidence of Jesus' existence. Lennox says it all comes down to the question as to whether ultimate justice is true or not. Dawkins readily admits to Jesus' existence, but denies any of his miracles, especially the resurrection. Lennox masterfully answers the question of biblical miracles using the testimony of ancient non-Christian historians, confirming not only the evidence of Jesus as a historical person who definitely existed, but also attesting to the evidence of his resurrection. Watch this.
I think there's something wonderful about standing up and facing up to a universe where we are increasing our understanding, and we throw away childhood obsessions, we throw away the sort of imaginary friend that comforts us when we're children, and we feel the need for some kind of parent figure to turn to. I think when we grow up, we need to cast that aside and stand up tall in the universe. And it's cold, and we're not going to last for it. We're going to die, and we face up to that. And I think that's a nobler way of getting through life than to pin your hopes on childhood illusions.
So we're back to the question, inevitably.
We need the evidence.
We need the evidence. And what I'm suggesting to you is that we do have evidence. We have it in science, part of God's revelation. And it seems to me that by truncating everything and putting it into the science basket, so to speak, that I get the impression that you're not taking history really seriously. Otherwise, you'd interact with it. And I'm trying to get to the basis of why that is so, because you regard what Jesus has done and who he is as petty. And I find the contrast between standing tall in a silent and cold universe with no hope, believing that your moral sense must ultimately be illusion. You're crying for justice because most people will never get it, because death ends everything. The contrast between that and enjoying the friendship, the personal friendship of God, and knowing that ultimate justice will be done, is immense.
Well,
but the basic question is it true or not?
Yeah, and that is the basic question. It is completely irrelevant if it's comforting, if it gives you hope, if it gives you happiness. That has nothing to do with whether it's true.
That I agree with
Okay.
entirely.
So we need to know whether it's true.
Yes.
Now, when you look at history, and let's leave aside, maybe I alluded to the possibility that some historians think Jesus never exists. I take that back. Jesus existed. However, if you're going to say that Jesus was born of a virgin, that Jesus walked on water, that he turned water into wine, that is palpably anti-scientific. There is no evidence for that. And if there were, you would be, well, I mean, no, there simply isn't any evidence for that, and no scientist could possibly take the idea seriously.
I can make it worse for you.
I know you can.
Because Jesus actually claimed to be the Logos that created the whole universe. And if this is the Creator incarnate, making water into wine and so on is really a triviality. The more fundamental thing is the fact that he claimed to be and gave evidence that he was God. When you say it's anti-scientific, I don't think it's anti-scientific at all. Science cannot say that miracles do not occur. It can say they're highly improbable. But nobody is claiming that these things occurred by natural processes. They occurred because God fed his power in. Nor did the whole universe, if we look at it, occur in that sense by natural processes. God created it. We study all the natural processes within it. So when you say it's anti-scientific, I think it's not anti-scientific.
What I mean by that is that if, and when doing science, we constantly have to keep in mind that at any moment there might be a little magic trick slipped in. That would completely nullify the whole enterprise of science.
Oh, I agree with that. But
well,
you see,
that's what you're allowing then.
No, I'm not allowing that at all, because in order to recognize what the New Testament calls miracle, a special act of God, you must be living in a universe that has regularities and that we recognize them. I agree with you entirely.
Otherwise
That's
you wouldn't
why-
notice the miracles. But,
That's
yeah.
exactly true.
Yeah.
You wouldn't recognize if dead people were popping up all over the place. You wouldn't think it was very special. But the fact is you need two things, not one. You've got to have regularities which we call the laws of nature, although they're not causes. They're, in a sense, descriptions that we can use. You also need to be able to recognize those so that, for example, when Joseph discovered that his wife-to-be Mary was pregnant, he simply didn't believe her story. He was going to divorce her. He knew exactly where babies came from. He knew the regularity. It took very special convincing for him to realize that something extremely special had happened. But science cannot stop that. The question is, of course, did such a thing ever happen? And the central focus in the New Testament is not that, which is not so readily accessible to evidence, the virgin conception, but the resurrection of Christ. And ancient historians, and this has fascinated me recently going over it, ancient historians whose discipline is very venerable, and I'm not talking about Christian ancient historians, ancient historians, many of them, even at the skeptical end of the spectrum, say that the evidence for the resurrection of Christ is very powerful. The explosion of the Christian church from a non-proselytizing group of Jews in the first century, the empty tomb and all the rest of it, has even led Geza Vermesh, who's one of the most distinguished ancient historians in Oxford, to say, yes, this tomb was empty, and hallucinations and this kind of explanation do not wash. So we have to ask ourselves, are we prepared to believe in historical testimony or not?
Well, you must talk to different historians than the one I talk to, than the ones I talk to. But in any case, I still come back to the point that you cannot do science if at any time you remember that famous cartoon of the.
Oh, I do. And therefore a miracle happens
and
in
the
the middle
miracle
of the
happens.
equation. Yes.
I mean, that is deeply against the spirit of science, and I don't think I could do science if I thought that at any time something like the resurrection, something like the virgin birth was going to be smuggled in by a godly caprice.
Okay, gentlemen, now what I would like to do, I want to give you ample time for your closing remarks. And so we will begin with Professor Lennox. You may take 5 minutes, no more than 5 minutes, and then we will conclude with Professor Dawkins. He will have the last word.
Has science buried God? I think not. Science arose in the 16th and 17th centuries, a meteoric rise that historians of science have looked at and come to the conclusion that one of the main motors driving the rise of science was faith in God. So far from belief in God being a science stopper, it was the thing that caused science to rise in the first place, understandably so, because people had a basis for believing that the universe was rationally accessible, and so they could do their science, which is apparently one of the reasons given by Needham, the famous sinologist in Oxford, when he looked at China and asked the question, why did science not develop in this way in China? And in the end, although he was a Marxist, he came to the conclusion that it was because of the Christian background. So I'm not ashamed of being both a scientist and a Christian. And I suppose that the major argument that points, doesn't prove, but points towards God is that this universe is a universe in which science can be done. The fact that the laws are there. Richard honestly says he doesn't know where they come from. They come from the logos, the mind that is behind this universe, that has created it by his power and for his glory. And therefore doing science, like Galileo and Kepler suggested, doing mathematics, is to discover the secrets of the universe in the language in which God has written them. The other reason why I reject atheism as an explanation is it doesn't even, to my mind, begin to rise to account for the rationality which lies behind science. Also, I think that the Christian faith, which I unashamedly espouse, is not anti-scientific. And I would plead for the same attention to be paid to history as is paid to science itself. I find very unconvincing arguments that trip very lightly over things that historians do accept, which mean that we should take the scholarship that has to do with the existence and the resurrection of Christ very seriously indeed. The other big area, which we didn't discuss in great detail tonight, is that if science has buried God, it seems to me there's something else that lies before us, and that is, where are we going to get our morality from? Because Richard has written in one of his books that the universe is just like we'd expect to find it. If at bottom there's no good, there's no evil, there's no justice. DNA just is, and we dance to its music. That seems to me to be a frightfully deterministic universe. And it troubles me to this extent, because it seems to me that on the one hand, the new atheists, of which Richard is a leader in the world, are trying in a way to hold on to the values that were given to them by Christianity, actually. And I would like to emphasize that, because in many of these books nothing good is said about religion. But Jürgen Habermas, who's not a Christian, of course,
30 seconds. 30 seconds.
Recently said that the foundations of our legal system and our education and our morality in Europe are based on Christianity. Everything else is postmodern chatter. What worries me is this, that can you really retain these good moral values and espouse atheism? Hard atheists like Nietzsche and Camus would say you can't. Eventually it will lead to madness. And some people are suggesting that that is actually what's going to happen. And I have a question for Richard Dawkins. Is his world the world of Peter Singer, where in the end moral values get so eroded by a naturalistic framework that Peter Singer can say a newborn baby is of no more value than a pig or a dog or a chimpanzee? Is that the world to which the new atheism is leading us?
Peter Singer is one of the most moral people I know, and when he says something like that, it is based upon a very rigorous moral philosophic reasoning. He's interested in suffering, and his point is there that a newborn baby, or certainly a human fetus, may be less capable of suffering than, say, a full-grown pig. That seems to me to be an entirely rational point of view, at least an entirely defensible point of view. However, it was tossed in at the last minute, and I don't want to take all my time dealing with that. John, you quoted me as saying the universe has at bottom no good, no evil, and you said it has exactly the properties we'd expect if there was nothing there. You said that sounds horribly deterministic. Well, another way of putting that would be to say that the universe is horribly rational, horribly intelligible. And one of the main points you've been making is precisely that we live in an intelligible universe. And that's one of the things that we need to explain, and you think it needs a God in order to explain it. What I would like to know is, what would an unintelligible universe look like? How could any creature live as we live? How could any creature have evolved and survived in a universe that didn't have that kind of mathematical intelligibility? It's the anthropic principle again. Just as we could only be living in a universe that has stars, because you need stars to make molecules, so we could only have survived in a universe where there is rationality. I cannot conceive of what an irrational, unlawful universe would look like. Now, science doesn't know everything. So it's one of the glories of science that we know what we don't know, and we work on what we don't know, try to shrink what we don't know. It's hard work. We don't cop out by saying, oh, well, if you come to a difficult problem, magic must have done it, or God must have done it. No, we don't say that. We say, right, that's a problem to be solved. It may not be solved this century, it may be solved in the following century, or the one after that. But we don't just lie down and give up and say, oh, well, it must be magic because we don't yet understand it. I would hold up Darwin as a model for the whole of science, because before Darwin came along, the whole of life, the complexity of life, the beauty of life, the elegance of life, the apparent design of life looked like magic. And everybody thought it was magic. Everybody thought that God did it. It's so complicated, it's so elegant. Now, that was the really big problem. That was a far bigger problem than the problem of the origin of life, than the problem of the origin of the cosmos. Darwin solved that problem. All scientists now know that. Darwin solved that problem, and in so doing, he provided us with a sort of parable that don't even think about giving up, because if ever there was a time to have given up, it was in the case of biology. Because biology really was a difficult problem, a hard problem. Darwin solved it. Now we have one or two other problems remaining, like the origin of life, like the origin of the cosmos, the origin of the laws of physics. No doubt that there are physicists here who can point to yet other ones. Darwin provides us with a lesson that says, don't give up, because if Darwin could solve it for the really difficult problem, which was life, then we have every hope that science will solve it for the other problems in the end. And even if it doesn't, even if science doesn't solve all problems ever, that is still no grounds for saying, oh, well, magic did it.
I found the concluding words of Dawkins in that last clip where he's closing out his debate with Linux to be fabulously ironic. Why? Because his faith in Darwinism is precisely worse than if he actually believed in the so-called magic that he believes that us Christians have faith in. Dawkins wholeheartedly believes in the demonstrable mathematic impossibility that this universe came into existence by a freak accident of chance. Magic would be a much better bet than his own solution. In the next clip, get ready for one of the most telling moments I've seen from Richard Dawkins. This clip was taken from Ben Stein's movie Expelled. Ben Stein is interviewing Dawkins here. In it, we see Dawkins' real faith, a faith that believes any explanation that excludes God. Here's the last clip. Watch this.
In the book.
Well, then who did create the heavens and the earth?
Why do you use the word who? You see, you immediately beg the question by using the word who.
Well, then how did it get created?
Well, by a very slow process.
Well, how did it start?
Nobody knows how it started. We know the kind of event that it must have been. We know the sort of event that must have happened for the origin of life.
And what was that?
It was the origin of the first self-replicating molecule.
Right, how did that happen?
I told you we don't know.
So you have no idea how it started?
No, nor has anybody.
Nor has anyone else. What do you think is the possibility that intelligent design might turn out to be the answer to some issues in genetics or in evolution?
It could come about in the following way. It could be that at some earlier time, somewhere in the universe, a civilization evolved by probably some kind of Darwinian means to a very, very high level of technology and designed a form of life that they seeded onto perhaps this planet. Now, that is a possibility and an intriguing possibility. And I suppose it's possible that you might find evidence for that if you look at the details of biochemistry, molecular biology. You might find a signature of some sort of designer.
Wait a second. Richard Dawkins thought intelligent design might be a legitimate pursuit?
And that designer could well be a higher intelligence from elsewhere in the universe. Well, but that higher intelligence would itself have had to have come about by some explicable or ultimately explicable process. It couldn't have just jumped into existence spontaneously. That's the point.
So Professor Dawkins was not against intelligent design, just certain types of designers, such as God.
All right, as we bring this lesson to a close, God's existence is a very important thing in our faith. It is the first and foremost thing. Without that faith in God and without actually believing what we see with our eyes as the evidence of that faith, then we are not going to be prepared to have any kind of eternal faith, because the God of glory has given us ample evidence so that even a fool should not err when it comes to understanding that God exists. The most wonderful psalm about this subject is found in Psalms 19. I want to read verses 1 through 4. It says, "The heavens declare the glory of God. The sky displays his handiwork. Day after day it speaks out. Night after night it reveals his greatness. There is no actual speech or word, nor is its voice literally heard. Yet its voice echoes throughout the earth, its words carry to the distant horizon. In the sky he has pitched a tent for the sun." The Lord and his glory is seen in the universe around us, and therefore let no one ever say that the Christian has blind faith. The Christian's faith is not blind. It is absolutely wide-eyed open. We are not the ones who are blind. It is the lost. It is the unbeliever who is in darkness, and they are blind. Our God is invisible. Therefore, to say that we're blind because we can't see an invisible God is a very huge misuse of the term blindness. We have a God who cannot be perceived by our eyes, but he can be perceived by his mighty creation that he has left behind. And so everything that you see was created by him, as it is emphasized in the book of John. Everything that was created by the word of God, and that word of God was made flesh and dwelt among us, and we beheld his glory as of the only begotten Son of God. This is what John said. He was an apostle. He touched the word of God. The word of God was Jesus Christ, and that was God manifested in the flesh. So we have an amazing God who has not left us in a blind state, but he has actually let us become those who have eyes to see. And so never, ever, ever let yourself be convinced that somehow our faith that we receive from God that takes us all the way to eternal life is a blind faith. It is by far not a blind faith. We have the creation around us that testifies of God, and we have the Word of God, which is the Bible, from Genesis to Revelation, which testifies of God and the greatness and the miracles of the Word of God, and how it is intricately woven together supernaturally testifies to its own supernatural existence. And so God has given us specific words, he has given us his specific will, and he has given us the evidence around us, and most of all, he has given us his Holy Spirit within us, testifying that we are the children of God. If you don't have that testimony in your spirit, then I pray that you will go back, read Ezekiel chapter 36, right around verse 24 through 27, and look there to see what it takes to become born again. It is God doing a work on the inside of you, giving you a new heart, a new spirit, and a new life. And that is what it means to be born from above. Pray to him, get that experience, and then watch for the fruitfulness that comes. God bless you. Thanks for watching. We'll catch you on the next lesson.